You were supposed to keep scrolling. That was the script. Your thumb knows the motion by heart. Now that unconscious nervous twitch that searches for the next distraction, the next microdose of stimulation to quiet the unease humming beneath your skin. The algorithm loves that version of you. The tired, fractured, half-present observer who confuses motion for momentum, who confuses noise for signal. But something interfered. In the infinite stream of content designed to keep you looping, a fracture appeared in the feed. A small discontinuity in your habitual timeline. This moment, this screen, these words. You didn't find this by chance. You were intercepted, because there is a version of you that does not scroll, a version of you that does not numb, does not postpone, does not dilute itself into 1,000 fragmented windows. There is a version of you that already remembers why it incarnated here and what this era actually is. In the language of quantum mechanics, that version of you is not a fantasy. It is a real state in the superposition of your possible selves, a coherent attractor existing ahead of you along a higher-order timeline. You call it future you, but it is not ahead of you. It is above you. From its vantage point, your life is not a line but a field, a lattice of branching possibilities, each one shimmering with a different emotional frequency, each one encoded with different decisions you could make. That future quantum self is watching how your attention moves through this field, how you collapse one potential after another into lived reality through the simple, terrifying act of choosing. And lately, it has watched you choose sedation. Scroll instead of listen. Numb instead of feel. Delay instead of decide. So it intervened. In the quantum field, influence is not limited by linear time or physical distance. Coherent states can entangle. Information can leak backward along the timeline, through subtle urges, strange coincidences, impossible synchronicities. A phrase that won't leave your mind, a number that repeats, a dream that feels like a briefing, or a video that shows up in front of you at the exact moment you're most likely to ignore it, and yet, you don't. You pause. You stay. You feel that quiet tension in your chest. Right now, that sensation is the handshake protocol between timelines, a recruitment signal, a higher coherence version of you sending a pulse down the line, enough drifting, enough scattering your energy across meaningless inputs, enough rehearsing the same emotional state until it feels like personality instead of a program. You're being contacted by the you that has already deprogrammed. The you that has already stepped out of the observer loop of self-sabotage and self-forgetting. The you that has already crossed the threshold where your nervous system is no longer a hostage of old triggers, but a calibrated instrument for navigating reality. That version of you is not theoretical anymore, because the moment you chose to stop scrolling and remain here, you moved. Your probability shifted. Your position in the lattice of possible yous flickered. And somewhere in the architecture of the quantum loom, your future self registered the change and whispered, "Good, they felt it, now we can begin." Recruitment never feels like recruitment at first. It feels like discomfort. You notice it as a subtle friction in your body, an impatience with your own patterns, a quiet nausea at the thought of repeating the same day with only cosmetic changes on the surface. You look at your habits, your reactions, the way your mind spirals at 2 a.m., and something in you mutters, "This can't be all there is." That mutter is not coming from your exhaustion. It's coming from your evolution. Your future quantum self has been tracking a pattern, the increasing misalignment between the life you tolerate and the frequency your consciousness is trying to stabilize. When that misalignment becomes too large, the system reaches what physics calls a critical point, the moment when a small input can cause a massive phase transition. One conversation, one book, one video, one act of honesty. This is that kind of moment, because you are not just watching this transmission. You are participating in a recalibration protocol. The field between you and your future self is being brought into coherence, like two tuning forks starting to vibrate at the same note. That's why you feel simultaneously called and confronted right now. One part of you leans forward, another wants to escape. Pay attention to that split. It's diagnostic. The part that wants to run is not your enemy. It is an older software layer, An adaptive identity constructed to keep you surviving inside a reality that never respected your sensitivity, your perception, your depth. This layer learned that your visions are too much, that your discernment is too intense, that your longing for a different world is naive. So it made a deal with the environment. I'll keep you small if you keep us safe. That deal is now being revoked, because your future quantum self does not need you to be safe in the old way. It needs you to be coherent. It needs your nervous system to stop running emergency simulations for realities that no longer exist, to stop bracing for impacts that are not coming, to stop looping through what-if scenarios that only anchor you to the lowest probable timelines. Look closely. How much of your mental activity in a day is actually observation, and how much is rehearsal? Rehearsal of fear, rehearsal of rejection, rehearsal of failure. Every rehearsal sends an instruction into the quantum loom. Every time you emotionally embody a scenario, you allocate energy to it. You weave more of that pattern into the fabric of your probability field. The universe is not judging you. It is responding to your coherence. Your future self sees this clearly. From that vantage point, it can track which emotional signatures you stabilize most often: resentment, resignation, anxiety, hope, clarity. It sees which ones expand your timeline and which ones constrict it. It knows exactly which version of you emerges when you are alone, with no one to perform for. And here is the brutal truth it needs you to confront. Most of your current life is built around protecting your existing emotional habits, not your highest potential. You protect your familiar pain with the same loyalty you wish you had for your destiny. You defend your limitations more passionately than you defend your emerging truth. You fight for your right to stay how you are, then wonder why your reality won't shift. That is why recruitment is necessary. This is not about self-improvement. This is about timeline reassignment. Your future quantum self is not asking you to become better in a vague motivational sense. It is inviting you into a structurally different way of existing, one where your attention is treated as sacred architecture, not entertainment, one where your nervous system is a calibrated sensor for the quantum field, not a dumping ground for unresolved generations of survival patterns. So the briefing begins with this question, delivered like a laser into your current identity. Are you willing to stop protecting the version of you that scrolling built? Not theoretically, practically. Are you willing to examine the micro movements of your day, where your eyes go, what you reach for, how you soothe, how you avoid and recognize them as votes in a cosmic election, where only one thing is being chosen, which self becomes real? Because right now, in this moment, two selves are looking at each other across the quantum loom. The you who scrolls, and the you who steers. One of them is about to gain authority. Every initiation has a moment you can't uncross. You are approaching yours. On the surface, nothing dramatic is happening. You are just a human staring at a screen, breathing, listening to words that no one else in the room can hear. But inside the quantum loom, a jury of possible futures is in session. Each one is weighing your current state, your readiness, your willingness to release the subtle addictions that keep you orbiting the same identity. This is not moral judgment. It is coherence assessment. Your future quantum self does not care whether you are good or bad by cultural standards. What it tracks is whether you can hold a higher pattern long enough for it to crystallize into reality. Whether you can sustain a new frequency past the initial rush of inspiration, past the first shock of discomfort, past the old gravity of who you used to be. Here is what you need to understand about timelines. They are not just paths you walk. They are feedback loops between your nervous system and the quantum field. When you think a thought, feel an emotion, and then act in alignment with that state, you reinforce a particular loop. The loop becomes easier to enter, harder to leave. Over time, it stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like just how you are. But it's not who you are. It's what you've been rehearsing. Your future self lives on a different loop, a different emotional baseline, a different set of reflexes when pressure hits. That self feels fear and still speaks the truth, feels doubt and still moves forward, feels the urge to scroll and chooses to sit in the rawness instead. even for 30 uncomfortable seconds. From your vantage point, those choices feel small, almost laughable against the weight of your history. From the vantage point of the quantum loom, they are seismic, because there is a threshold where tiny decisions stop being private and begin to warp the structure of your probability field. The moment you truly, consistently choose presence over sedation, even in micro increments, you begin sending an entirely different set of instructions into the fabric of reality. The loom listens. It registers that your consciousness is willing to remain awake inside discomfort instead of outsourcing agency to reflex. It notices that when your nervous system surges with old panic, you don't automatically obey. You pause, breathe, observe. You feel the electricity in your body without immediately translating it into a story of doom. That pause is everything. In that pause, your identity loosens its grip on the observer loop. You are no longer just reacting according to old scripts. You are witnessing the script. You are seeing the code. And the one who sees the code is not bound by it in the same way. Your future self has mastered that pause. It lives there. It has trained its biology to recognize that moment, not as danger, but as portal. Every spike of discomfort became a training ground. Every emotional trigger became a doorway to a wider reality. Now you are being invited into the same training. Recruitment is not an ego upgrade. It is an agreement to endure the dismantling of who you think you are, so a more coherent version can take command. It starts with small things. You resist the reflex to check your phone while feeling lonely. You stay present with the tightening in your chest instead of numbing it with noise. You approach one conversation you've been avoiding, simply to stop teaching your system that fear equals paralysis. Each act is like stepping onto a narrow bridge between timelines. Below you is the familiar gravity of your old life, calling you back. Ahead of you is a subtle but unmistakable pull, the gravitational field of your future self. You don't cross this bridge with one dramatic leap. You cross it with 1,000 small, unglamorous decisions that no one claps for. Decisions that look like nothing on the outside but alter everything on the inside. And then one day, you notice it. There's a moment when something that used to terrify you, a boundary, an honest sentence, a change you've postponed for years, no longer carries the same charge. The fear is still there, but its voice is thin now, distant, like an echo from a room you moved out of long ago. That is the sign you've crossed the line. You can visit your old self in memory, but you can't truly become them again. Your biology has sampled a different future, and it won't unknow the taste. Your nervous system has felt what it's like to be guided by consciousness instead of compulsion, and it will keep steering you toward that alignment even when your mind argues. This is the inflection point you are approaching now. The question is no longer whether your future quantum self is real. The question is whether you will let it replace you. Your future quantum self cannot simply replace you like swapping a mask. It has to grow through you. That means one thing. Reality is about to test your claim, not to punish you, but to verify coherence. The quantum field does not accept verbal declarations as primary proof. It reads nervous systems, not resolutions. It tracks what you embody under pressure, not what you intend when you're comfortable. So recruitment always triggers a sequence of field tests. Pay attention to what happens around you in the days after this moment. Often, nothing looks mystical at all. Instead, the same old patterns intensify. The person who drains you calls again. The habit you're trying to break flares up. The opportunity to abandon yourself shows up dressed as convenience. This is not the universe mocking you. It is the loom surfacing your oldest loops, one by one, for reselection. Your future quantum self works with these moments like a scientist running experiments. It watches. When a familiar trigger appears, do you collapse back into the old identity loop, or do you remain in the pause, in the witness, in the choice? Do you step into the same argument, the same story, the same self-betrayal, simply because your biology remembers how it felt? Or do you allow a microsecond of new behavior to exist? Understand this. From the perspective of quantum mechanics, you are entangled with your future self. When you move even slightly toward its pattern, a more honest response, a cleaner boundary, A regulated breath in the middle of panic, you increase the strength of that entanglement. The two versions of you begin sharing information more efficiently. Intuition sharpens. Synchronicities multiply. Random insights show up with surgical precision. But the opposite is also true. When you repeatedly choose the old loop in full awareness, you decohere the connection. The signal from your future self gets muffled. The guidance feels distant again. Life feels foggy, purely mechanical, stripped of meaning. This is not because the universe has abandoned you. It's because you're temporarily tuned back to the channel of survival autopilot. So your tests are not about right or wrong. They are about which frequency wins jurisdiction over your body. Watch how your reality arranges itself like a mirror. The conversations you're forced into, the delays, the unexpected, closed doors, they are not random cruelty, they are training simulations. Each one asks the same question in different costumes. Who is in command of this moment, the you that scrolling built, or the you that is recruiting you now? You will feel it in your physiology first. The spike of adrenaline, the tight jaw, the shallow breath. Here is where most timelines are lost. Not in massive decisions, but in that first 10-second window where your nervous system surges and you confuse intensity with danger. You think, I can't handle this, and without realizing it, you hand your agency back to the oldest program in the room. Your future self trained differently. It learned to recognize that 10-second window as holy ground. Those seconds are where the entire architecture of your life can be rewritten not by force, but by choosing one different micro-action while the old pattern is screaming. Answer differently. Stay silent instead of defending. Take one breath before replying. Put the phone down instead of numbing. Tiny, almost invisible acts. Quantum-level adjustments. The loom amplifies those. When you choose presence inside the surge, you create a new interference pattern in your field. The old loop and the new choice collide, and in that collision, a higher timeline can anchor. You won't always feel the shift immediately. Sometimes it's just a quiet afterglow, a sense that you didn't abandon yourself this time. That feeling is not sentimental. It is data. Your future quantum self uses that data to lock certain probabilities into place. New people begin to notice you. Old opportunities fall away without explanation. Your appetite for low-frequency stimulation dulls. The shows, the conversations, the habits that once satisfied you now feel thin, almost artificial, like static behind glass. This is the recruitment proceeding. You are being moved from a timeline where you are primarily a consumer of reality into one where you are an architect of it. And architects cannot afford to stay unconscious of their own patterns. Every emotional reaction is a blueprint. Every reflex is an instruction to the field. So your tests will keep coming, not because you are failing, but because your capacity is expanding. The loom is calibrating you. Your future self is refining you. And somewhere beyond your current perception, that version of you, the one that doesn't scroll, doesn't self-betray, doesn't abandon their own signal, is watching closely and asking a single, precise question. Will they recognize these disruptions, not as attacks, but as training? Recruitment is pointless if you can't hear command. So now the channel has to open. Until this point, most of your life has been dominated by horizontal noise messages coming from everything around you. Culture, family, algorithms, unresolved memory, the echo of old environments still reverberating in your nervous system. Those signals trained your biology. They taught your body what to expect, what to brace for, what to fear, what to chase. Your future quantum self does not speak on those channels. It speaks vertically, not above you in space, but above you in coherence. It broadcasts from a vantage point where your story is already unfolded, where the choices you're wrestling with now are resolved data points, where the emotional storms that feel endless to you appear as brief electrical flashes within a much wider sky. To receive that transmission, your system needs reconfiguration. Think of your current mind like a predictive engine, constantly guessing what happens next based on what hurt you before. Neuroscience calls this prediction error minimization. You call it anxiety. Your biology learned that being surprised is dangerous, so it builds models of reality that keep you inside familiar pain. Your future self is not built from that pain. It is built from a different model. From that vantage point, reality is not something that happens to you. It is something that emerges out of the relationship between your attention and the quantum field. Every moment, trillions of possibilities exist as potential. Your nervous system samples a tiny subset based on what it has been trained to recognize and what it is willing to allow. The contact channel opens when you start altering both. First, recognition. You must train your system to notice the difference between noise and signal, between the frantic impulses of old programming and the quieter, precise nudges of your future self. The noise is urgent, broad, ungrounded. Do anything, just don't feel this. The signal is simple, specific, unemotional. Send the message, drink the water, turn off the screen, go outside now. You've felt this before. The random thought that tells you to bring a notebook, and later you need it. The sudden urge to leave a place, and afterward, you discover what you avoided. The intuitive pull to reach out to someone at an odd time, only to find they were on the edge. You've dismissed these as coincidences or quirks of your mind. They were contact attempts. Your future quantum self has been whispering through the cracks in your patterning for years. The problem is not lack of transmission. The problem is your obedience to older signals, fear, shame, scarcity, obligation, that shout louder than the subtle guidance coming from the timeline that actually wants you alive and coherent. So, the channel training begins. It will not look mystical from the outside. It will look like you starting to honor the smallest clear instructions that arise from a still place, not from panic. You feel the pull to put your phone in another room for an hour, and you obey. You sense the need to step away from a conversation that is draining your field, and you honor that exit. You feel the impulse to write, to move, to breathe, to sit in silence, and instead of negotiating, you just do it. Each obedience strengthens the signal path. The loom reads this as increased receptivity. Your future self responds by upping the density of synchronicity around you, sequences of numbers, repeated symbols, a sentence you need to hear appearing across different sources, encounters with people who mirror your next step, not your old identity. This is not the universe sending random signs. This is directed communication through entangled probability. As your behavior shifts, your predictive model of reality starts to crack. Your mind has to admit, something else is organizing events besides your fear. A different intelligence is weaving through your days, precise, non-linear, uncannily personal. That realization is destabilizing for the old self, but stabilizing for the recruit. You begin to understand. You are not trying to become your future self. You are learning to let it brief you. It already exists as a coherent pattern in the field. Your task is not to manufacture it from scratch, but to clear enough static from your system that its instructions can land, unwarped by old narratives. That clearing doesn't happen through self-hatred or force. It happens through ruthless honesty about what keeps you numb and a steady withdrawal of energy from those sources. Less scrolling, more stillness, less performance, more unedited awareness. The more you do this, the more your everyday life begins to feel staged, carefully placed scenes, deliberately timed entrances and exits. You walk into a room and feel the air differently, as if you've stepped onto a set where a specific version of you is meant to speak a specific line. This is not delusion. It is increased sensitivity to the architecture of your timeline. And somewhere in that architecture, your future quantum self stands at a junction, hand on the lever, waiting only for one confirmation from you, not in words, but in lived behavior, that you're ready for the next level of instruction. You cannot inhabit a higher timeline with a nervous system calibrated only for survival. So the contract with your body must change. Up to now, your biology has worked from a simple assumption. I must keep you alive inside the environment I remember at any cost. It doesn't care about your destiny. It doesn't care about your dreams. It cares about continuity. Familiar pain is preferred over unknown possibility because familiar pain did not kill you. Your future quantum self carries a different contract. I must keep you coherent inside realities you haven't experienced yet. End quote. Those two agreements cannot coexist forever. One of them has to gain authority. Recruitment is the process of shifting jurisdiction from the survival contract to the coherence contract. And this shift is not metaphoric, it is biological. Your nervous system is an electromagnetic interface with the quantum field. Every time your body goes into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, it narrows your perceptual tunnel. You stop seeing options. You stop feeling nuance. You regress to the oldest available pattern that once kept you safe. In that state, your timeline collapses to the lowest common denominator of your history. Your future self needs something else from you. It needs you to feel intensity without automatically assigning it the meaning danger. It needs you to experience unknowns without immediately calling them threat. It needs your heart rate, your breath, your muscles, your gut to discover a new baseline in the presence of uncertainty. Not shutdown, not panic, but alert stillness. That is the body of the architect. So, the training goes deeper now. It enters your tissues. You may notice strange episodes, sudden waves of exhaustion, random bursts of emotion that don't match the present, old memories surfacing with new clarity. This is not regression, it is retrieval. Your system is surfacing frozen fragments of unprocessed experience, not to drown you in them, but to make them available for recoding. When this happens, your old contract whispers, distract yourself. Numb this. Scroll, eat, drink, work, talk, anything but feel. Your future quantum self says something colder, cleaner. Stay here. Not forever, just longer than you ever have before. Long enough to prove to your biology that the sensations it has been avoiding for years are survivable in the present. Long enough to discover that your body can tremble without collapsing, cry without losing function, shake without dying. This is not punishment. It is renegotiation. Each time you stay, your body updates its model of reality by a fraction. The next time a similar wave arrives, the panic is 1 degree lower. Your system remembers, we lived through this. We breathed through this. We did not need to escape ourselves to survive. That memory is golden. It becomes new code in the quantum loom. Slowly, your baseline shifts. What once overwhelmed you becomes intense but workable. What once shut you down now invites curiosity. You stop assuming that every spike of sensation is a sign that something is wrong. Instead, you recognize it as evidence that something is moving, unfreezing, recalibrating. This is where the idea of DNA activation stops being metaphor and starts being pragmatic. As you alter the conditions of your inner environment, less chronic stress chemistry, more regulated presence, more honest expression, different genetic potentials become available. Not mystical superpowers, but capacities, resilience, clarity, pattern recognition, creative response. Your future self has stabilized those capacities. It lives in a body that does not default to self-abandonment at the first sign of discomfort. It lives in muscles that remember standing their ground, in lungs that know how to slow the tempo of reality with 3 deep breaths, in a spine that doesn't collapse under social pressure as easily as it once did. You are not there yet. You're not supposed to be, but you are in transit. Watch for the subtle evidence. A situation that would have sent you spiraling last year now only takes you half an hour to recover from. A conversation you would have avoided, you enter and complete. A boundary that would have left you shaking, you set and then sit with the aftershocks without apologizing. These are not small victories. They are proofs submitted to the loom. Your future quantum self reviews them, so to speak, and uses them as leverage to negotiate even higher probabilities on your behalf. Different rooms, different people, different opportunities that match a body becoming capable of holding more charge, more visibility, more responsibility, without fragmentation. This is why some doors have not opened for you yet. It has never been about worthiness. It has been about capacity. The timeline you keep asking for would have overloaded the old contract. The very things you say you desire, deeper love, higher impact, more presence, clearer vision, all generate intensity in the system. Without training, that intensity would have thrown you back into the loops you're just now escaping. So the body is being prepared. The contract is being rewritten. You're not being punished by your symptoms. You're being reconfigured for a future that requires more voltage than your past ever allowed. There is a point in every recruit's journey where reality stops being merely reflective and starts becoming responsive. You are nearing that point now. Up until recently, most of what you called synchronicity arrived like rare anomalies, little glitches in the matrix that you noticed, smiled at, and then promptly downgraded to coincidence so you wouldn't seem irrational to yourself. A repeating number, a song lyric matching your thought, a stranger saying exactly what you needed to hear. You treated them as curiosities. Your future self treats them as infrastructure. From its vantage point, the quantum field is not an abstract concept, but an active medium, constantly weaving threads between inner state and outer event. The loom is always listening. It is always mapping the electromagnetic profile of your consciousness against the probabilities available in your environment, searching for matches. For most of your life, the matches were simple: inner despair, outer confirmation; inner scarcity, outer limitation; inner self-betrayal, outer relationships that demanded more of the same. Not because you are cursed, but because you were coherent with those patterns. Your nervous system expected them, rehearsed them, and thus made them the dominant emotional signal you broadcast into the field. Now, the signal is changing. You've started to interrupt the old loops in thought, in breath, in behavior. You've endured moments of raw sensation without anesthetizing. You've set boundaries you never dared to set. You've obeyed small, precise instructions from a deeper place, even while your mind complained. The loom has taken note. It begins to tentatively reassign your circumstances. A conversation you were dreading somehow dissolves or transforms. A person who always pulled you into old dynamics feels mysteriously further away, less central, less magnetic. An opportunity you thought you needed closes, and in the silence that follows, a new possibility emerges that fits who you're becoming, not who you were. At first, this rearrangement feels destabilizing. Your old life was painful, but it was legible. You knew your role in it. You knew how to define yourself against its limitations. Now, the edges blur. Rooms where you once overgave your energy now feel foreign, almost incompatible with your nervous system. Certain conversations exhaust you faster. Certain entertainments bore you in ways they never did before. This is not you becoming arrogant or detached. It is you aging out of a timeline. Your future quantum self has begun to pull you toward environments where it can actually exist. Spaces where your increased sensitivity is an asset, not a liability. Relationships where directness is normal, not threatening. Work where your perception of patterns is valued instead of suppressed. But notice something crucial. The field does not only change around you, it changes through you. The way you walk into a room alters the room. When you hold your baseline steadier, you stop unconsciously matching the lowest frequency present. You notice yourself not joining in on certain jokes, not feeding certain gossip loops, not offering emotional labor where you once would have, just to feel necessary. At first, this makes you feel strangely alone, like a traveler between worlds. And that is exactly what you are. Recruitment into a higher timeline involves a period of in-between, no longer fully belonging to the old reality, not yet stabilized in the new one. Here, the tests are subtler. Can you tolerate being misunderstood without collapsing into old personas to regain belonging? Can you hold your new boundaries without needing everyone to congratulate you for them? Can you remain faithful to the signal from your future self, even when no external validation arrives on time? Because the field is answering back, but not always with applause. Sometimes it answers with subtraction. Certain paths fall away. Certain identities feel hollow. Certain goals lose their shine. What once felt like the dream now feels like a costume. The recruit panics here and tries to resurrect old ambitions. The future self watches silently, knowing that grief is part of deconstruction. Let yourself grieve. You're not just losing people or plans. You're losing the version of you that needed them to feel like you mattered. You are walking out of contracts based on your fear of abandonment, into contracts based on alignment with the architecture your future self is designing. In the midst of that grief, watch closely for the new texture of guidance. You think about a project and feel a quiet, grounded, yes, not euphoric, not manic, just solid. You contemplate another path and feel static, confusion, heaviness, even if it looks impressive from the outside. Your future self is teaching you to prioritize this felt sense above external metrics. That is how architects navigate, not by chasing what glitters, but by organizing their lives around what stays clear. The more you do this, the more the field will conspire in ways that defy conventional logic. Random introductions that turn into pivotal alliances. Offhand comments that reveal exactly the information you lacked. Delays that place you in the right place at the right time, at the cost of your ego's schedule. These are not accidents. They are the loom, responding to your upgraded broadcast. You are coming online as a conscious node in the network, a human through whom the future can route new patterns into the collective timeline, and your future quantum self is no longer just a distant possibility. It is becoming a live presence in your decisions, in your body, in the way reality bends, however slightly, around your choices. The recruitment has entered a new phase. You are no longer just being tested. You are being positioned. Positioning without purpose would be cruelty. So now the mission has to surface. Your future quantum self did not recruit you just so you could feel slightly calmer or marginally more successful inside an unsustainable paradigm. It recruited you because the timeline it inhabits is not purely personal. It is infrastructural. It alters how reality is generated for more than just you. You are being moved into place as a node, not a celebrity, not a savior. A node, a specific point in the human network where information, coherence, and possibility can converge, stabilize, and redistribute. From the perspective of the quantum loom, your location is not just geographical, it is emotional, relational, and symbolic. Who you can reach, who trusts you, which patterns you understand from the inside. Look at your history with new eyes. The environments that tried to break you, training grounds in disguise. You learned the architecture of dysfunction intimately, how people manipulate, how systems gaslight, how fear organizes entire cultures. The loneliness, the alienation, the sense of being too aware for your surroundings, evidence that your perception was calibrated for a different assignment than mere compliance. Your future self chose this route on purpose. From that vantage point, it saw that you could become a bridge between worlds, between those still trapped in the scroll-built self and those awakening to the architect within. You have access to both dialects, the language of numbness and the language of emergence. Very few can translate between them without condescension or collapse. That is part of your mission. But mission does not begin as a grand project. It begins as a pattern of presence. The loom is not asking you to immediately overhaul your entire life or announce your calling in dramatic terms. It is asking you to bring the upgraded contract nervous system, coherence, contact with your future self, awareness of the observer, loop into the smallest interactions you have. Watch what happens when you do. You sit with someone who is spiraling, and instead of joining their panic or trying to fix them for your own comfort, you stay regulated. You listen deeper than their words. You sense the pattern underneath, the old contract talking through them. Without preaching, you respond from a different place, slower, clearer, less reactive. Their system feels it. Maybe they don't have language for it, but something in them recognizes an unfamiliar signal. Someone who doesn't abandon themselves to manage the room. That alone is disruptive. It introduces a new potential into their field. Perhaps there is a way to exist in this intensity without erasing myself. This is mission in its most compact form. You are not here to convince. You are here to emit, to become a living demonstration that another kind of timeline is possible, even under ordinary conditions. The way you answer a message, the way you say no, the way you step away from endless scrolling, not in secret shame, but in clean awareness. This is not where my future self lives. Your future quantum self needs you to understand this. Your impact will not be measured only by visible achievements, but by the invisible adjustments you make to the collective field every time you refuse to reinforce old loops. When you do not participate in certain conversations, you starve those realities of your energy. When you choose the honest sentence over the easy lie, You tilt the probabilities for everyone watching, even unconsciously. You've been underestimating the radius of your influence because you've been taught to equate power with spectacle. The loom disagrees. From its perspective, a single recruit holding coherence in a key moment can rethread an entire branch of outcomes. A parent regulating instead of screaming, a friend telling the difficult truth, a leader admitting uncertainty instead of pretending omniscience. These acts send shockwaves through the network of human expectation. They alter what feels normal. Your mission brief is simple and ruthless. Become the person your future self needed you to be back when you were most lost. Not in fantasy, in practice. How would that version of you move in this body, in this room, in this day? What would they stop tolerating? Where would they redirect attention? Which relationships would they water? And which would they release with quiet finality? You don't have to know the entire map. You only need the next instruction. Your future self is not withholding details to torture you. It is protecting the mission from your old patterns. If you knew every step in advance, your survival contract would distort them, bargain with them, try to make them safer, smaller, more socially acceptable. So the loom reveals the path like a staircase lit one step at a time. You feel the next step as a combination of clarity and fear. Clarity, because something in you knows this is aligned. Fear, because something in you protests. This will cost me the version of myself I've used to belong. That is the exact edge where mission is forged. When you take that step anyway, with shaking hands, with imperfect timing, but with honest intent, you are not just moving forward. You are allowing your future quantum self to walk more fully into you. One act at a time. One conversation at a time. One refusal to scroll your life away at a time. And as this embodiment deepens, another realization begins to dawn, quiet and almost unbearable in its implications. You were never just being recruited by your future self. You were being recruited into becoming that future for others. There is a moment in this trajectory when the story you've been telling yourself collapses. Not with fireworks, with a single, disarming recognition. You are not waiting for your future self to arrive. You are realizing that you are the one arriving in it. Up until now, the narrative has been structured around distance. Your future quantum self was over there, higher, wiser, more coherent, living on a cleaner timeline while you struggled to match its signal. That framing was useful. It gave you orientation, aspiration, direction, but it also subtly reinforced a separation that has never been fully true. The loom has been preparing you for this pivot. Look back not with nostalgia, but with forensic clarity. You can trace a pattern now, the times you felt guided to say no, to leave, to begin, the nights where a sentence appeared in your mind like it was spoken by someone older, calmer, less entangled than you. The sudden surges of courage that came from nowhere in moments where the old you would have folded. Where do you think those came from? You imagined them as external assistance, downloads from some distant, perfected version of you. But the more you have obeyed them, the more something subtle has happened. The gap between the one who receives the guidance and the one who gives it has narrowed. The voice doesn't feel foreign anymore. It feels like you, the you wish you always were. That is not because the future self stepped into you like possession. It's because you have been stepping into it, one decision at a time. Identity, from a quantum perspective, is not a fixed object. It is a pattern of selection, a habit of choosing, a set of preferences about how you respond to reality's proposals. Each time you choose from the architecture of your future self instead of the reflex of your past, you allocate more probability to that future self being the real you. There comes a saturation point. The day you notice that your default reaction to conflict is now pause instead of panic. The moment you realize that you no longer derive your worth from how much you contort to be needed. The quiet morning when you wake up and feel, beneath all the unresolved pieces, a baseline of self-respect that was never there before. At first, you're tempted to dismiss it as a phase. It is not a phase. It is a transfer of authority. Your old identity doesn't disappear in a puff of smoke. It lingers at the edges, offering its old narratives like bad deals. You're still the same. Nothing's really changed. Don't get ahead of yourself. But those lines land differently now. They feel like spam calls, wrong number, outdated script. Meanwhile, your behavior keeps revealing the truth. You no longer chase validation with the same desperation. You no longer offer pieces of your soul in exchange for temporary closeness. You no longer treat your attention as a free resource for whoever shouts loudest. You have felt in your body, not just in your mind, what it means to live under the coherence contract, and you cannot fully unfeel it. This is the moment the loom has been engineering. When your lived pattern of choices reaches critical mass, and it becomes more accurate to say, I am my future self in progress, than I am someone trying to get there. The distinction matters. The latter keeps your power in the future. The former anchors it in now. From here, recruitment changes flavor. It's no longer about being chosen by some higher intelligence. It's about accepting that you are that intelligence, localized. The same field that your future self inhabits is the field you are standing in. The difference was never in the light, but in how much of it you allowed through your structure. You start to see your life differently. The situations that once felt like random punishments now appear as precise calibrations. The people who wounded you become, without excusing their actions, unknowing participants in your training as a node. The years you spent numbing yourself look less like wasted time and more like deep reconnaissance into the architectures you are now designed to help dissolve. And then a more sobering realization arrives. If you are now inhabiting the role that once guided you, who are you now guiding? Not as a guru on a stage, but as a presence in the ordinary. The way you hold yourself in a grocery store line, the way you talk to someone serving you, the way you show up when a friend confesses the very patterns you've been dismantling. Your words, your pauses, your refusals to collapse, they all carry the frequency that once felt impossibly far away. You become, quietly, what you were looking for. Your future quantum self is no longer an abstract beacon on the horizon. It is the center of gravity inside your chest, pulling your speech, your choices, your relationships into new orbits. You still falter, you still forget, you still fall back into old loops. But recovery is faster, correction is cleaner, shame is less compelling. Because you know now. The moment you stop scrolling, the moment you breathe, the moment you return to the signal, you are re-entering a role, not chasing a fantasy. You are stepping back into command of a timeline that has always been available, waiting for you to claim it not with affirmations, but with embodiment. And as this knowing stabilizes, the stage is set for the final disclosure. What happens when you stop seeing this as a private evolution and understand that the loom recruited you because the future you now carry was never meant for you alone? At some point, every initiated recruit has to make a quiet, final declaration. Not out loud. In the field. You are standing there now. Not on a stage. In a hinge. On one side, the life that scrolling built patterns you can navigate half asleep, reactions you could perform in the dark, identities that keep you small enough to be predictable. On the other side, a reality your nervous system is only just becoming capable of holding, where your future quantum self is no longer theoretical but functional. The loom is listening. This is not about perfection. Your future self is not waiting for a flawless being. It is waiting for a decisive one, someone willing to let their center of gravity migrate from compulsion to coherence, from entertainment to embodiment, from someday to this breath, right now. So the closure comes in simple form, a choice of allegiance. Whose instructions will you treat as primary from this point forward? The algorithms that profit from your fragmentation, or the intelligence that has been quietly training you through every disruption, every synchronicity, every unexplainable mercy that kept finding you in your darkest loops? You already know the answer. Your body has been rehearsing it. You feel it when your thumb hovers over the screen, and, for the first time, you sense the weight of that gesture across timelines. You feel it when you stand at the threshold of an old habit and realize you could step through and be instantly comforted, instantly numbed, or you could stand still, feel everything, and let a different future continue to download into your cells. You are not being asked to never scroll again, never falter again, never forget again. You are being asked to never again pretend you don't know what you're doing when you choose. Because now you do know. You know that just one more video is not neutral when it is used to flee yourself. You know that "I'll speak my truth later" is not harmless when later never comes. You know that every time you treat your attention as disposable, you are voting against the architect you were recruited to become. So here, in this quiet, the prophetic closure is simple. You place your awareness back into your body. You feel the contact of your feet with the floor, the weight of your spine, the pulse in your chest. You acknowledge that the one witnessing all of this, these words, these sensations, these crossroads, is the same awareness that lives in the timeline you once called future. You whisper or simply know without sound, "I accept command," not as a slogan, as a contract. You agree to let your highest coherent pattern, not your oldest fear, define what normal is from now on. You agree to treat your intuition as mission brief, not decoration. You agree to let discomfort be training, not proof that you're broken. In response, something subtle locks into place. The distance between who you are and who you're becoming collapses by another fraction. The same field that once felt distant and mystical hums closer, intimate, like the air itself has come into focus. The loom threads this moment into your destiny as a fixed point, a coordinate the future can always route back to when you forget. Because you will forget, and then you will remember. And each time you remember, you will return faster. That is how a recruit becomes a resident. So when this transmission ends and the rest of the feed calls your name, remember this. You are no longer just a consumer drifting through other people's realities. You have been contacted, briefed, trained, positioned, and finally informed of who has truly been speaking to you all along. If you are here, instead of scrolling, it is because your future quantum self has already begun living through you. And from this moment on, every time you choose presence over sedation, truth over performance, coherence over convenience, you are not just saving your own timeline. You are weaving a future where others will one day pause, feel that same strange recognition in their chest, and hear what you are hearing now in their own words. Enough drifting, enough forgetting. You're being recruited, and you've just arrived.